everybody. Welcome to the garage. I'm looking forward to talking to you on Friday from the dining room table where we can have a chat, and you'll see the phone number pop up on the garage door when I say goodbye today. It's coming together well. I mean, I don't exactly know what we're creating, but I sense it's interesting. I really do. Guests on Friday will be Andrew Kelly, who is the most brilliant guy in advertising. I mean, he was the guy that people would come to South Australia to get him to work. Sydney, Melbourne, they'd come here to talk to Andrew because he was the genius. Still is. Don't know why he retired. Anyway, it's interesting. That's not rain, is it? No, because it's quite warm here at the moment. You know, it's a spring day, I tell you. It's out in the garden, you can see springs busting out everywhere. Anyway, Andrew Kelly will be on the show on Friday. Christine Esau, who was with me in the early days of the Court of Public Opinion here in the garage when we were doing it on Channel 44. She was one of the ladies of wisdom who would come in and talk to us. And Leon Biner as well. Leon Biner, a man who has made his enormous impression on radio and television in Australia. So I look forward to that. Speaking of radio, just quickly, I don't dwell on the radio ratings, but radio ratings to me are a little bit like the stars. You know, when you read the stars, your personal astrology, when it's good, you believe it. When it's not, you don't. But it seems that Mix, my old station, it wasn't called Mix when I owned it, it was 5AD FM 102.3. And it was number one by a country mile, not quite so much today, but it's back to the number one spot, which I'm sure they're happy about. But going back to my recent times in radio, talk stations. Now, talk stations in every single city in this country. Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Perth. Number one everywhere. Not Adelaide. Nope. Talk stations 5AA and the ABC Adelaide radio stations hold two of the bottom three places among local stations, with the ABC losing share to remain in the basement. Well, the reason for that is very simple. If we have anyone from the ABC listening, you tune on to the ABC and you get lectured. And they want to talk to you about Aboriginality. Everything is Aboriginal. You must have a death wish or a fascination with living in the cellar. But I won't talk to you about AA because that would be impertinent and not proper. So I won't. But I would say that the talk stations of Adelaide should be up there with Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth in the number one slot, because it's a fascinating time for talk radio. No excuse in the world for being on the bottom. Ah, unbelievable. Hey, what do you think? What do you think is the favourite Australians' favourite animal sound?
Well, for me,
yeah,
the magpie by a mile.
The magpie.
Oh, of course, yeah.
You haven't looked at this, have you?
No.
You haven't cheated?
No. I love the magpie's call.
Well, it's true. Magpies make Australia's favourite animal sound. But their calls are more than just a pretty tune, it says here. This is it. The people have spoken, and your favourite animal sound is the iconic caroling and the warbling of the magpie. Swooping to a landslide victory in our National Science Week 2003 poll, Pete agrees with it 100%, obviously. With 36% of the vote, Magpies clearly won the hearts and the ears of Australia. Magpie's song echoes across most of the country, including our cities and our suburbs. You can spot them in tribes of up to 24 individuals living in and actively defending their territory. What else? While there is just one magpie species in Australia, there are up to 9 subspecies, I didn't know that, which can also look quite different. Down south, for example, adults tend to have a white back, whereas in the north, they can almost be completely black. What they all have in common is a formidable repertoire of calls. Absolutely. Pete?
Least favourite sound
The least favourite sound?
has to be the koala.
Oh, yes, it's a growling noise, isn't it?
Terrible. Yeah.
Grunting, growling. I can hear it in the middle of the night up here. We've probably got about 3 or 4 on the property, and they defend their territory by, I suppose, barking like that. I don't know. But, you know, as far as I'm concerned, nature is wonderful in all its shapes and forms. It doesn't really matter. Shares on Wall Street, quite buoyant. That'll be reflected in the local market probably tomorrow. I want to talk to you about Friday. On Friday, when our live stream show goes to air, which is jeremycordo.com, I want to talk to you about this whistleblower legislation. There's a lot to it, but about 30 years ago, state and federal governments instituted whistleblower legislation to give courage to and reward to people who had the chutzpah to step up and call things out. Name places and people and times, misdoings. Fascinating story where that in 30 years that legislation has been totally impotent. It's never achieved anything. There was one person helped to the tune of, I think it was a compensation of $5,000 for a ruined life. Now, one thing we must have is strong whistleblower legislation, so we can come forward with courage, knowing that our courage will be rewarded, not penalised. But that's Friday. We'll talk more about that. Richard Marles, the Defence Minister, Deputy Prime Minister as well, he has run up a bill, which of course will never be paid, of $3.6 million. $3.6 million. This is for his VIP private plane costs. This is 1 year. This is this year. The Deputy Prime Minister is using military aircraft to drop him off at an airport close to his home in what has been dubbed in the media as a personal taxi service. Richard Marles is booking military planes to pick him up and drop him off at Avalon Airport, closer to his home in Geelong. This is saving him a 1-hour chauffeur-driven ride from Melbourne, but the flights are contributing to that staggering figure of $3.6 million in just 1 year. Now, Samantha Maiden, writing for News Limited, says, publicly available flight tracker information. Now, I'm not sure what that is exactly, but that publicly available flight tracker information obtained by News Corp details over 70 RAAF flights in and out of Avalon, 70 since March this year. Now, he has the power to book flights for himself and others as the Defence Minister, but won't publicly confirm whether some or all of those flights are his own doing. He cites security advice. Who have you got on the plane with you? What security advice? The opposition is quite rightly all over this. One Liberal described it as a scandal, scandalous, that Richard Marles is spending millions of taxpayers' dollars secretly using RAAF jets as a personal chauffeur service. A full investigation should be conducted into the secret flights, and they are secret because he's made them secret, particularly for those into Avalon Airport for the convenience of this gentleman. I wonder if Richard Marles thought that this would just go through to the keeper. Nobody would notice $3.6 million. $3.6 million worth of personal self-indulgence. We should do a segment, and I think we will. Pete, we will. A segment on things I heard around the trough. You know, the usual slurp, 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 slurp sounds. And speaking of the trough, federal MPs are about to enjoy the biggest payday in decades. Everyone seems to be getting a 4% pay rise, heads of departments, government departments and so forth, and ministers and members. The decision was made at arm's length by the Remuneration Tribunal, the guys who decide these things. Now, they have said that the salary for an MP will go from $217,000 a year to $225,680 a year. The Prime Minister's salary will go from $564,200 to $586,768. Peter Dutton, Leader of the Opposition's salary goes from $401,450 to $417,508 a year. It's interesting, you know. It would be a vexed question as to what these people should be paid, as opposed to what they actually earn or what they are actually worth. It's interesting that the President of the United States, I would suggest a much bigger, more important job than the Prime Minister of Australia, is paid just $400,000 annually. Now, the Prime Minister of Australia looks after a country of 26 million. The President of the United States is responsible for a country with a population of about 350 million people. But anyway, just going back to the salaries. He is paid now, the President, $400,000 annually, and that amount was set by Congress in 2001. Prior to that, the President's salary had been locked in at $200,000 a year, $200,000 a year for the last 30 years. When here in Australia, we've got the ludicrous situation where heads of various government departments, services and whatnot, are paid around $1 million, sometimes over $1 million a year. I guess the Prime Minister is entitled to half that. But we are not the United States, and we don't have the national wealth, and we don't have the tax base. But we throw money around without too much thought, it would seem. Now, Tony Denton, a friend of mine, he's the guy who set up jeremycordo.com down on the dining room table. He's often said to me, and I agree with him 100%, No one in public service should be paid more than the Prime Minister is paid. And that's, of course, far from the case these days. Have we got time for some dates?
Yeah.
Oh. Goody, goody, goody. It's almost the end of the month. It's August 30. And here in the garage, in the Court of Public Opinion, I can tell you that on this day in 2015, English author Frederick Forsyth, Day of the Jackal, he reveals that he worked for MI6 for almost 20 years. I'm surprised that MI6 let, and I have spoken to Frederick Forsyth every time he had a book out, and that was probably once every couple of years. So I've talked to him many times. I am really surprised that this eloquent, urbane, smooth James Bond kind of character, that they would have let him write these spy books while working for MI6, which is the overseas spy agency. It's interesting. Anyway, what else can I tell you? The hotline communication link between the Pentagon and Washington, D.C., well, Washington, D.C. and the Kremlin in Moscow was installed, often known as the red telephone. Actually, I have to tell you here, there was no telephone ever used. They relied instead on teletype equipment, fax machines, and most recently, secure emails. But no red telephone. It was just something really romantic about that red telephone. You know, ringing. Oh, well, I guess that's the way it is. That was 1963, that hotline was put in place without the red telephone. City of Melbourne, Australia is founded in 1835. That's 1 year before South Australia. 1850, Honolulu, Hawaii becomes a city. 1963, Guy Burgess, English-born spy, Soviet spy, dies of acute liver failure at 52. 63, that was. The Late Show with David Letterman debuts on CBS. One of the last good things that CBS have done, I think. I loved David Letterman. He was just so good. That was 1993. Gee, I would have thought it would have been before that. 1993, The Late Show with David Letterman debuts on CBS from the Ed Sullivan Theatre in New York City. Bill Murray is his first guest. Billy Joel performs. Good. Cameron Diaz, 72, American actress. Chic, The Mask, My Best Friend's Wedding. Born in Long Beach, California. Charlie's Angels as well, of course. That was 72. 72. I've got ties older than that. HMS Pandora sank after running aground on a reef the previous day on her return from her search for the bounty and the members and the mutineers who had taken the ship. That was 1791 on this day. Valerie Harper, American actress, dies of cancer at the age of 80. That was 2019. American songwriter, the great Carole King, 17 years old, weds American lyricist Jerry Goffin, 20. They divorced in 1969, but married this day in 1959. And the songs they wrote together were just wonderful. I don't know about their marriage, but they certainly knew music. Of my era, anyway. Max Factor, Polish-American makeup artist, inventor and founder of the cosmetics company Max Factor and Company. dies at the age of 60. That was 1938. The first German plane bombs Paris, kills 2, 1914. Curly. Charles Bronson, American actor, Magnificent Seven, Death Wish, The Dirty Dozen, dies at 81, 2003. 1993, 150 million. The 150 millionth visitor to the Eiffel Tower. Pete, have you ever been to the Eiffel Tower?
I've seen it, but I haven't found it.
Well, you've done more than me. Golly. And Warren Buffett, interesting guy, 1930, American business magnate, world's wealthiest person in 2008, born in Omaha, Nebraska. I don't know whether he's still alive or not, but you know, he was very frugal. He used to drive around in this beige-coloured Volvo, a sort of 1960s or 70s Volvo, and he could have afforded anything. But he was very frugal, Warren Buffett. The first record released by Apple, the Beatles single Hey Jude, 1968, and one more, Nancy Wake, New Zealand-born World War II secret agent, 1912. I spoke to her, what was her book called? Was it The White Mouse? There was a radio serial called The White Rabbit, but that was different. I think they called it The White Mouse. Born in Wellington, New Zealand, died in 2011. Gee whiz, lovely lady. Thank you so much for viewing the Court of Public Opinion. Ladies and gentlemen, I remind you again to join us on Friday from the dining room table, jeremycordeaux.com. That's all it is. Very simple, jeremycordeaux.com. And we'll deal with a lot of this stuff and flesh out some of these bones with a lot of special guests as well. Believe in yourself. Pete and I will be back tomorrow. Bye for now.